I'm Jay Elias, General Legal Counsel at Dyer-Lake Funeral Home in North Attleboro. Welcome to this episode of Live and Learn, a series of programs designed to be informative, educational, and upbeat, and always intended to enhance and encourage our personal wellness and awareness. What if? It's a question we may occasionally ask ourselves, some more often than others. What if? It's the name of a Disney television series based on the popular Marvel Comics series that explores alternate timelines in a fictional universe. And it's a series on Netflix that explores the ripple effects of what happens when otherwise acceptable people start doing unacceptable things, and how a single fateful decision can change the trajectory of someone's life. What if? It's the title of a series of essays that offer reflections on some monumental historical events. What might have happened if key moments in time had gone differently? For example, what if John Kennedy had survived his assassination? Or what if the South had won the Civil War? Or what if the Allies had lost in World War II? What if the Cuban Missile Crisis of the 1960s had escalated into full-blown war? What if? The question leaves a lot to the imagination and presents countless questions to scientists, mathematicians, clergy, physicians, philosophers, teachers, and parents. What if you had chosen a different path in life, whether personally or professionally? What if you had said yes instead of no, or turned right instead of left? What if you had failed just one science test in school and your parents and teachers thought that maybe you ought to focus your talents in language rather than science, and so you did? But what if you had aced that same test and instead you were encouraged to pursue studies in science? What if? What if you had scored that one important goal, sank that one winning basket, or maybe hit that perfect note in choir? Where you are in your life at this moment in time is, in significant part, a result of the choices and decisions made throughout your life. Not only your choices, but others that were made for you. Although many of the choices and decisions you made along the way may have seemed inconsequential at the time, maybe they were, in fact, life-altering. Choices and decisions. Is there really even a difference between making a choice and making a decision? We often use the terms interchangeably. It seems, generally speaking, our decisions take more of an investment of time and energy and can involve some kind of risk and may require some more of a sense of determination. Is it time to change where you live or your job? Those may be decisions more so than choices. We tend to make fewer decisions than we do choices. Most of us make countless choices every day. What time you go to sleep at night or wake up in the morning, what you'll wear tomorrow, what you'll have for breakfast. Do you say hello or hi or maybe nothing at all when you see someone? It's your choice, not so much decision as choice. And when it comes to making those weightier decisions, there are a few distinct and varied decision-making styles. Are you an impulsive decision maker? Do you tend to take the first option you're offered and then be done with the matter with seldom an afterthought? Do you instead tend to delegate your decisions to someone you trust? That's a bit like the avoidance and deflection approach to making decisions. You often avoid making most decisions in an effort to avoid taking any responsibility for their impact, good or bad, and have few regrets because you actually didn't even make the decision. There are those who prefer to balance and weigh the facts before making any decisions. They like having an element of reflection and thought behind them. But for the impulsive decision maker, they'd say the person who balances and weighs the facts before deciding is apt to suffer from what they might say is paralysis by analysis. And on the other end of the spectrum, for those who tend to deliberate, balance, and weigh, the phrase that comes to mind when they consider impulsive decision makers is extinct by instinct. It's often noted that Teddy Roosevelt once said, "In any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing. And the worst thing The worst thing you can do is nothing. And as to those innumerable choices in our life, as children, we were often encouraged to make good choices. Maybe not whether we did our homework or stayed up late, but instead maybe it was who we played with after school. But it's been said that children learn to make good decisions by making decisions, not by following directions. Do you think you could have been happier if you'd made different choices in your life? Can you even choose happiness in your life? Is having a positive outlook the same as being happy? If you're a glass is half full kind of person, does that mean you're happier than the glass is half empty kind of person? Is pessimism the same as negativity? And is being negative at odds with being happy? Phew. It's been suggested that at our core, we are all wired to have a certain negativity. That is, we tend to look for things that can go wrong. That's different than being pessimistic, though. Maybe you could say it's being cautious or even pragmatic. That is, dealing with things in a sensible, practical, and realistic way. Why is that? Well, it's been said that by searching out the negatives we come across, we're actually protecting ourselves. It's something of a survival mechanism to help protect us from being lulled into a state of complacency. By looking for what might go wrong in a situation, that is, the what ifs, we're far better equipped to plan our actions and reactions. And that both protects us and helps minimize any regrets we may have for failing to act appropriately under the circumstances. And then there are those of us who believe that everything in life happens for a reason, so there's absolutely no point in having regrets. No matter how happy or unhappy they may be, they find regrets to be useless. On the other hand, there are those who, looking back on their lives, linger over one poignant moment or another and wish they had said or done things differently, asking the question on and often, what if? A national survey about the regrets of a typical American found the majority of regrets relate to failed romance, family, education, career, financial decisions, parenting, and health. And it seems there are two primary ways most regrets can be framed. One has to do with the things we wish we had not done. That is, regrets about our actions. And the other, the things we wish we had done but did not, or regrets about our inaction. A number of studies tell us that regrets about the actions we had taken and then come to regret were far more common and more intense than regrets about our inactions. Regrets about our inactions, wishing we had said or done something that we chose not to say or do, they tend to linger far longer for us, though. Bronnie Ware, a palliative caregiver in Australia, wrote a memoir called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, a life transformed by the dearly departing. She wrote of her years of caregiving to the dying and the wisdom they imparted, and of the phenomenal clarity of vision that people seem to gain at the end of their lives, and how we all might learn from their wisdom. When her patients were questioned about the regrets, the what-ifs in their lives, she was amazed to find a commonality that repeatedly surfaced. The top 5 regrets that were repeatedly expressed to her were these. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And as the 5th common regret, it was this. I wish I had let myself be happier. The author noted that many people simply didn't realize until the end of their life that happiness was actually a choice. Stuck in old patterns and habits, the comfort of familiarity overflowed into every aspect of their lives, and the fear of change had them pretending to others and to themselves that they were content, when deep within, she noted, they longed to laugh and rediscover some of the silliness and lightheartedness of their youth. As with other things in life, once you made the conscious decision to do something, to be happier in your life, You then begin looking for evidence to support that choice. You begin to create new patterns of behavior and form new habits. Deliberately choosing to acknowledge even an occasional positive experience during a day can help to reinforce that new habit. The soup was perfect on a cold day like this, or it was nice talking to her today. Then some of those what ifs may be replaced with a few I'm glad I did. In another study from Cornell University, 1,200 older individuals were asked about their regrets in life. Two of the most prevalent regrets were, I wish I hadn't spent so much of my life worrying. And similarly, I regret I worried so much about everything. The key characteristic of worry, according to those who actually study the subject, is that worry too often takes place even in the absence of actual stressors. That is, we worry when there's really nothing concrete to worry about. That kind of worry, ruminating about all the possible bad things that may happen, is counterproductive when it comes to solving the real problems when we're faced with them. It's been said that if you can work to solve a problem, then there's no need for worrying about it. And if you can't solve the problem, then what's the use of worrying? And throughout history, there have been writers and thinkers who claim that the key to happiness and to having fewer regrets and what-if moments can be found in living a simpler life with fewer possessions. Buddha and Socrates, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, they each promoted a simple, frugal lifestyle. There's living off the grid and something known as the Voluntary Simplicity movement, which espouses a way of life that is outwardly simple, inwardly rich. It suggests that we should scale back our lifestyles and avoid the cycle of working and spending beyond the point of necessity. It suggests that we have far too many choices as consumers, and those choices lead to indecision, indifference, and regret. Less is more. Make room in life only for the things you genuinely care about. And when you consume, do so carefully and consciously. And you end up with fewer belongings, fewer regretful acquisitions, and far fewer what-ifs. So let's change gears a bit. There you are as a child at a beach on Cape Cod, pail and shovel in hand. You start digging in the sand when someone tells you that you keep digging, you'll end up in China. So you keep digging, but all you get is water filling up that hole. What if you kept digging around the clock for days, weeks, and months? Would some kindly person be there to greet you on the other side of the world as you emerge tired, wet, and covered in sand? Well, if you were to study a map of the earth, you'd discover that had you continued digging at that beach in Cape Cod, or pretty much anywhere in the continental United States, you'd probably end up not in China, but somewhere in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Most of the Earth's surface is, after all, covered by water. An antipode is the point on the Earth's surface that is diametrically opposite to the point. Antipodal points are as far away from each other as possible on the planet. And there are very few places where you could start digging on land, and if for some fantastic reason you could end up on the other side of the world, you'd remain dry. Greenland to its antipode, Antarctica, might be your best bet. Or you might dig your way from Argentina to its antipode, China. Or maybe from Spain to New Zealand. Although tunneling through the earth is obviously an impossibility given the thousands of miles of molten rock that lie between us and the other side of the world, what if, instead of that plastic shovel, you had some heavy-duty equipment to bore through the center of the earth? How far could you get? How long would it take you to get there? In the middle of a now crumbling building is a heavy, rusted metal cap embedded in the concrete floor, secured by a ring of thick and equally rusty metal bolts. According to locals, it's the entrance to hell. In reality, it's the Kola super deep borehole, the deepest man-made hole and the deepest artificial point on Earth. The approximately 7.5-mile deep construction is so deep that locals swear you can hear the screams of souls tortured in hell. It took the Soviets almost 20 years to dig that far, and that was, sad to say, still only about a third of the way through the crust to the Earth's mantle when the project came to a grinding halt, in large part due to much higher than expected temperatures, about 356 degrees Fahrenheit instead of the expected 212 degrees. It seems that the rock beneath the Earth's surface behaved more like plastic, making drilling nearly impossible. Let's do an about-face. What if you could walk to the moon? Well, the moon is about 250,000 miles away, and humans on average can walk at about 3 miles an hour. That means it would take about 83,000 or so hours to walk to the moon, and with about 8,800 hours in a year, it would take you about 9.5 years walking non-stop if you could. And that stairway to heaven, well, if you stopped off at the moon, it would be about 480 million steps to get there. What if you could walk around the world? The Earth is about 24,900 miles in circumference at the equator, and at that pace of about 3 miles an hour, it would take just shy of 1 year to walk that distance without stopping. What if you won the lottery? Not just a scratch ticket, but the numbers, the big numbers. Millions of people ponder the question every week as they're enticed by the promised riches of the Powerball lottery. Powerball is actually a multi-state lottery game administered by something called the Multi-State Lottery Association in Iowa on behalf of 45 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Did you know that Powerball jackpot value you see advertised on the billboards and on TV reflects the jackpot annuity value for each drawing? And that number is calculated to be 32.5%, about a third of the expected Powerball ticket sales in the current drawing cycle. The largest jackpot to date? On January 13, 2016, 3 ticket holders shared the $1.586 billion jackpot. And by the way, the odds of winning the Powerball grand prize are generally about 1 in 292 million. Speaking of what-ifs and regrets, we've all heard the stories suggesting that most big lottery winners squander their fortunes in a short period of time. In fact, though, studies and statistics don't support that finding. It seems the truth is that most big lottery winners do just fine, and the problem is us, not them. It may be more a function of sour grapes by the majority of people who never won big and who find it, well, more satisfying to think that those who have won have foolishly squandered it all. Although for Evelyn Adams, a clerk in a convenience store, things started out great, but didn't end up quite as good. After deciding to increase her weekly lottery spending from $25 to $100 a week, she won the New Jersey lottery for almost $4 million in October 1985. Remarkably, 4 months later, she won the same lottery again, this time for $1.4 million. The odds of winning that first jackpot, they were about 1 in 3.2 million. And for the second, the odds were about 1 in 5.2 million. After winning her first prize, she paid off her bills, set up a fund to pay college tuition for her daughter, bought a new car, gave gifts to those close to her. After winning the second time, she vowed to stop playing the lottery or gambling. But she soon started down that slippery slope. She actually bought and then sold the same convenience store where she had worked. And by 2012, well, sadly, she'd spent all of her winnings, having lost her money to gambling in the casinos in Atlantic City and to a string of unsuccessful business deals. She had 2 what-if moments in her life. They were realized, but it seems they weren't enough. Speaking of millions, here's a question for you. What if you were offered the choice of receiving $1 million cash today, no questions asked, or taking 1 penny and doubling it every day for 30 days? When asked, the overwhelming majority of people say they'd take the $1 million today. A bird in the hand, you know. So let's do the math. 1 cent on day 1, doubled on day 2, that would be 2 cents. By day 10, you'd have a whopping $5.12. But on day 20, that would grow to $5,242.88. And by day 28, you'd have $1,342,000 and change. And at the end of the 30th day, you would have received $5,368,000. So if you said you'd take the $1 million cash today, you'd have shortchanged yourself by more than $4 million at the end of the month. And by the way, if it was one of the months with 31 days, you would have received almost $11 million, starting with 1 penny a day, doubled every day. That's the power of compounding. Albert Einstein once said that compounding, or compound interest, is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. And here's one. Once upon a time, there was a craftsman who made beautiful chessboards, and he was as much a con man as he was a craftsman. He knew his king loved chess, so when he presented one of his beautiful chessboards to the king, he said, "Your Highness, I don't want any money for this. All I want is a little rice." "I've got rice," said the king. "How much rice?" "Well, what if, instead of money, you put 1 grain of rice on the first square of my chessboard and then double the number of grains on each successive square, the full 64 squares?" The king quickly agreed. And similar to the penny a day story, 1, then 2, then 4, then 8, and so on. And by the end of the first row of the chessboard, there were 128 grains of rice. In the second row, things really began to develop. And by the 21st square, the king owed over 1 million grains of rice. By the final 64th square on the chessboard, the number of grains of rice was more than 18 quadrillion. That's 18 with 15 zeros, and it was far more rice than the king could afford. Knowing that it would take less than a second to count 1 grain of rice, but it would take the craftsman more years than he had to live to complete the full count, the king insisted that the craftsman count the grains of rice on each square to assure him that he hadn't been cheated by even a single grain. Knowing that it would be impossible to do so, the craftsman gave the king the chessboard and the rice. And here's one. In 1973, researchers asked seminary students at the Princeton Theological Seminary to visit a group of children across campus and deliver a sermon about the parable of the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan. The seminary students were then divided into 2 groups. One group of future pastors were told, "It'll be a few minutes before they're ready for you across campus, but you might as well head on across campus now." And so that group, they were in no hurry. The other group was told, "You're late. They were expecting you a few minutes ago. Hurry up. You'd better get moving." While then proceeding across campus, each student passed a man slumped in a doorway, moaning and coughing. Imagine the situation. A classroom of children awaits you across campus to learn the story of the Good Samaritan, but along the way you encounter a man who's clearly in distress. Is there any doubt what you do or what you expect the group of religiously attuned students to do? It seems, though, that the amount of hurriness induced in the subject had a major effect on their helping behavior. For the first group, those were in no hurry, only 63% of them stopped to help. For those who were told they were late and who felt the need to hurry, remarkably, only about 10% of those seminary students stopped to offer assistance. The best explanation researchers could offer for the behavior was that amid the anxiety of running late, most of them experienced a perceptual shift that caused them not to see the man or recognize his distress. That is, it wasn't that they made a conscious decision to avoid helping the man. Instead, they seemed not to even see the man or his distress. What if you're the first person to show up at a presentation and you sit alone, waiting for others to arrive when smoke starts billowing from a wall vent? Would you immediately get up, leave, seek help, or pull the fire alarm? What if instead you're sitting in your seat in the middle of a presentation and the moderator is speaking in front of everyone? You notice smoke billowing from that wall vent and you look around to see if anyone else sees what you see, including the moderator, and you conclude that there's no mistake. Everyone sees the same billowing smoke. Your colleagues and the moderator, they all look in the direction of the vent, shrug, and continue on, speaking or listening and engaging in the program. Do you get up and leave, seek help, or pull the fire alarm, even though no one else seems to care about the smoke coming from the vent? It seems that when you're alone and encounter an emergency, the pressure to take action weighs heavily on you, and you likely act immediately. But when everyone else around you witnesses the same event and does nothing, do you stick to your intuition and do something? Or do you trust that others in the group will act accordingly and have knowledge of the circumstances that maybe you don't? In a social psychology study known as the smoky room experiment, researchers explored a phenomenon known as diffusion of responsibility. And they found that if someone is alone when they notice what they believe is an emergency, they're solely responsible for coping with it and acting on it. But when others are present, they tend to feel that their own responsibility for taking action is somehow reduced, and they're far less likely to seek help or act on their instincts. Why? It seems that passive behavior from others indicates that the event may not be what we think it is, even if we think it's dangerous, and thereby it influences us not to react. In the original 1968 study, the smoke was, of course, harmless, but the subjects didn't know that. When they were alone in the room, they were significantly more likely to report the smoke to the experimenters, and they did so quickly. In fact, 75% of the subjects reported smoke within a matter of moments. But they were in the room with two other actors who behaved indifferently. Only 10% of the subjects reported their concern about the smoke. The findings shed light on group behavior in very uncomfortable circumstances, and the findings are a bit unsettling. It seems groups of strangers appear to disregard emergencies, and it's a very frequent occurrence. Witnesses of emergencies rely on social cues from others to inform their actions or their lack of action. So here's an everyday ethics what-if question. What if you're pulling out of a tight parking space in a parking lot and you scratch or dent the car next to you? What if you were pretty certain no one saw you? What would you do? Would you be tempted to leave and avoid the hassle of reporting the incident? Would you leave a note? What if you already had a fender bender this year and your insurance rates will increase? What if you think someone may have witnessed the incident? What if your child or grandchild is in the car with you and they saw what happened? Would that change what you would do? Should it matter whether someone witnessed what you did or not? What if you found a suitcase full of money? Would it matter how much money was in the suitcase? Let's say it was $50. What if it were $10,000? What if it was $1 million but in $1 bills? Would you be tempted to keep a few dollars? Would it matter where you found the suitcase? Let's say it was outside a bank. Let's say it was hidden in the woods. Let's say it was an envelope on the street. And if you chose to keep the suitcase or its content, would you tell anyone that you found it, or would you keep it a secret? What if you could travel to space? What if, like 90-year-old actor William Shatner recently did, you had the opportunity to travel to the edge of space for just a few minutes? Would you do so? Would it matter if you had to pay for the experience, or if it were offered to you at no cost? If given the opportunity, would you travel to the moon? What if you had the opportunity to travel to Mars, but knew that because of the length of time it took to get there, you could never return to Earth? I'm Jay Elias. Thank you for watching this episode of Live and Learn. I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to your joining me again for another program designed to enhance and encourage your personal wellness and awareness. Until then, remember, it's never too late to learn, and consider this. It's been asked, what if the secret to success is failure? And it's been said, better an oops than a what if.